Auditori salutem, chers Madame et Messieurs, liebe Damen und Herren, Dames and Heren, ladies and gentlemen, leef lui.
Terra Mosana is a project based on doing research, on digitizing and on presenting the cultural heritage of the Eurasian Meuse-Rhine, the EMR. Terra Mosana is a project aimed to make heritage accessible and to make it attractive for civilians, tourists, children and adults. It discloses heritage reservoirs in an easy way. It wants to seduce more people to visit the region, which is a touristic effect, and to make them stay longer, which is an economic effect. But it is also specifically designed for the EMR civilians who need and want to learn more about the shared history of the region they live in. The method used was to scan in 3 dimensions some still existing heritage, to reconstruct lost heritage, and to model new ideas about our past. It was a unique possibility to connect cities like Aachen, Jülich, Leopoldsburg, Liège, Maastricht and Tongeren. You will experience, you will see, you will hear, you will enjoy many 3D digitizations and storylines. Man has always been on the move in this region. Hunters and gatherers were always roaming the land for food. Even when people built stationary houses, they were still searching for arable land, building materials, water and resources. But also trade and forced migration brought people on the move. In early modern times, people traveled to offer their specialized skills because of economic activity, or they moved looking for work or temporary labor. Mobility and migration are strongly connected. Since prehistory, man built strongholds and fortifications in the Eurasian. In the earliest phases, they were made of mud and wooden posts, but starting with the Romans, also stone reinforcements occurred. The medieval earthen and later stone town walls were sufficient until approximately 1500 AD. The introduction of gunpowder was a game changer. Cannons became the decisive instruments of war. The evolution of the successive fortification techniques are visible and visitable within the Eurasian Meuse-Rhine. From Roman Tongeren via medieval Aachen and Renaissance Jülich, to the subterranean gallery system of 18th century Maastricht, and the relatively recent citadel of Liège. The Eurasian Meuse-Rhine never was one land or state. It was always divided over kingdoms, empires, smaller areas, and even autonomous states. In the first millennium, the capital of the Eurasian often changed place. The center of power was moved by successive ruling families. Thus, the center of power of the Eburonian Atwatuka moved to Roman Tongeren, the bishopric Maastricht, imperial Aachen, and the prince-bishopric Liège. Famous families originating from the Eurasian, like the Pippinids and the Carolingians, formed the base of today's Europe. Nothing was more important for the Eurasian than the Roman Catholic Church. Christianity took over power starting in the 5th century. By the end of the 6th century, religion was part of the political and economical importance of the region. The religious economy existed in a growing number of churches, monasteries, saints, and pilgers. Out of this, an ever-growing wealth and even more growing secular power emerged. The wealth expressed itself through the building of cloisters, in education, healthcare, and care for the poor. During the reform of the 16th century, the luxuriance and many possessions were strongly criticized. After the French conquest, shortly before 1800, the dominating role of the church abruptly came to an end. Religious institutions, like chapters and monasteries, were abolished and their possessions nationalized. When the Romans took over power in the Euregion, a long period of relative calm and peace occurred, the so-called Pax Romana. By the end of the 3rd century, invading Frankish leaders gained power and kept this power. They also kept existing structures intact. After again a period of relative prosperity, conflicts emerged between the successors of Charlemagne. By the end of the 1st millennium, the Euregion was part of the Holy Roman Empire, but was also harassed by wars of succession. By the end of the 18th century, the Holy Roman Empire existed out of 365 small kingdoms and principalities. In 1815, the Euregion was divided between newly defined nations. These nation-states were followed by an imposed layout in language and culture. A region once so united was now divided by strict borders. Until the start of the Industrial Revolution, the practicing of crafts took place inside the cities. Before 1800, every town had specialized craftsmen who were organized in guilds. Those craftsmen were well educated and delivered the best quality. The Euregion was successful in woven linen, leather production, coppersmithing, weaponry, standing clocks, wooden furniture, silver works of art, books, and the art of printing, stucco, glass, and ceramic production. This high-quality production brought a lot of merchants and traders to the Euregion, and as a result, wealth. Obvious that this could also lead to economical pioneering during the later Industrial Revolution. Urbanization is a process that is alike in the Euregion and in the whole of Europe. But the start and the degree of stonification of the towns differs a lot. The availability of building materials defines everything. But also wars and city fires were reasons for the transition. For example, Tongeren is characterized by successive phases of building in wood and stone, and back in wood again. Maastricht was hardly damaged by city fires, so the transition from wood to stone took place in a straight line from the 17th century onwards. Jülich, on the other hand, was completely devastated by fire in 1474 and 1547. That is why the current layout in Jülich is based on a Renaissance design, 1548, of the Italian architect Pasqualini. He designed a completely new city structure, including a fortified citadel. The Euregion is rich on resources. The industry started in the Liège area and expanded rapidly towards Maastricht. Entrepreneurs like John Cockerill, Liège, steel, and Petrus Rehu, Maastricht, ceramics, played a key role. The separation of Belgium in 1830-1839 caused many problems because the borders were closed. The coalfields that were exploited years later were situated in the underground of the Euregion, and they didn't take any notice of the borders. This exploitation left visible scars in the landscape. Also, older forms of mining existed. For example, flint mining in the Middle Neolithic period, Reichhold, the mining of lead, silver and gold during the Roman times in the northern Ardennes, and later also copper mining in Stolberg near Aachen. The Euregion was the central stage for many wars because of its positioning in between France and the Holy Roman Empire, later Germany. In the beginning, these wars were fought by hand, but in the 19th century they evolved into large-scale political military conflicts between nation-states. The most destructive of all was the Second World War, during which airstrikes caused thousands of casualties. Bombardings during the nights left huge scars in the landscape and invisible scars in the mines. The land was rebuilt, the cities restored, but in the minds of the survivors, the memories still exist. To keep these alive, many monuments were erected. This war had a huge influence on the Belgian, Dutch and German side of the border. This is also a part of the shared history, but of a different kind. The identity of the residents of the Euregion is largely determined by their individuality and culture, which they share across borders, such as popular expressions, food, religion, and traditions. Think of the manner of communication, enjoyment, food culture and fruit pies, beer and wine culture, pilgrimage of the relics and processions, carnival, folklore and festivities, but also individuality, aloofness, and sometimes stubbornness. On the other hand, there is an interest in innovation, practical and higher education, architecture and design. Many traditions have withdrawn within the national borders in the last 2 centuries, but doing comparative research, the similarities within the Euregion soon become visible. The love for the landscape and its own environment stands out above all else, pride in provenance, origin, and a deep history. The current division of the Euregion in 3 countries is a relatively recent situation. The borders can be heard in the official languages that are spoken, but it wasn't always like that. 200 years ago, the most used language was French. Often, rulers decided what language had to be used. Besides official languages, many dialects also existed that functioned very well in cross-border situations. These dialects originate as deep in history as the official languages do. The dialect diversity can be heard up until today.
Wir verstehen elkaar.
Wir verstehen den
Wir verstehen uns über die Grenzen von hier hin.
Wir verstehen einander über Landesgrenzen hinaus.
Language and other immaterial heritage directly mirror a person's culture and identity, and can in this way be seen as a private property. Regarding the issue of migration, most people think of refugees of war or economic refugees, but migration exists for more than thousands of years as part of man's life. For the larger part of prehistory, seasonal migration was the only way to survive. Only when man stopped roaming around did his lifestyle change completely. Property and land had to be defended. Wooden enclosures and later stone walls kept enemies and strangers out. During the Middle Ages, pilgrims travelled through Europe on a large scale. During the early modern age, armies marched from land to land, and soldiers were hired by the highest bidder. Sometimes these soldiers were billeted for a longer period in a town, or they got married and settled. In this way, many inhabitants of the Euregion originate from military strangers. Innovation doesn't mean inventing continuously. Being curious and wanting to know how things work is the base for development. The Euregion played a modest but important role in a variety of inventions in the fields of science, physics, and medicine, but also in pictorial art, geology, biology, and industry. In addition, even in practical innovations like designing bridges and buildings. Even today, the Euregion counts many institutions of science and higher education. A recent ambitious project is the building of the Einstein telescope. This €2 billion costing observatory measures minimal anomalies in gravitational waves caused by colliding stars in the universe. Let us take notice of the shared, common history of the Euregion and experience the steps that brought us to this day.
Veel verhalen vertellen ons verleden tussen Maas en Rijn.
Beaucoup d'histoires racontent nos passés entre Maas et Rijn.
Viele Geschichten erzählen unsere Vergangenheit zwischen Maas und Rijn.
Heel veel vertelseltjes.
Sagen en vertellingen.
Veel verhalen vertellen ons verleden tussen Maas
En Rijn.
History offers context. It might inspire all of us to work on a collective future.